You probably think free universal daycare is like the ultimate modern miracle.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone does.
Right, like a magic pill to fix falling birth rates, a lifeline to save stressed out working parents, basically the pinnacle of an evolved society.
That's the narrative, yeah.
But what if I told you that the math from a massive 10-year social experiment proves the exact opposite?
Mm-hmm.
What if the very policy that was meant to save families actually broke the kids it was trying to protect?
It's a staggering premise. It completely subverts everything we are taught to believe about social welfare.
Completely.
But when you actually look at the raw data from one of the most ambitious social experiments of the 20th century, that whole utopian narrative just falls apart.
It just shatters. So our mission today for this deep dive is to unpack this incredibly explosive 2013 paper.
Yeah.
It's from the National Bureau of Economic Research, the NBER, authored by Kottelenberg and Steven F. Lehrer.
Right.
And we need to state right at the top, unequivocally, that we're strictly reporting the math here.
Yeah. It's just the math.
Exactly. Because this topic touches on some of the most sensitive cultural and political debates you could possibly imagine.
Oh, yeah. Working mothers, government welfare, the family structure.
Right. And we are not here to judge working parents.
Not at all.
And we are definitely not advocating for any specific political ideology. We're looking at a 10-year data set from a massive natural experiment. We're just following the numbers.
But the numbers, they're going to slap you right in the face.
So to understand the sheer shockwave of this study, you really have to transport yourself back to Canada.
Specifically Quebec?
Right, looking at the time frame from like 1976 to 2008.
Yeah, because the demographic landscape was undergoing this profound tectonic shift.
Massive.
You look at the employment rate of mothers with children under the age of 6, and it skyrocketed. It went from 31% up to 71%.
31 to 71. That is a complete rewiring of the daily function of the family.
In just a single generation.
Exactly. You have this massive influx of women into the workforce, which, is a triumph for economic independence.
Absolutely.
But the societal infrastructure for child rearing at home is suddenly vanishing.
Right. The economy demanded 2 incomes, but the biology of a toddler still demands constant care.
Yeah, toddlers don't care about the GDP.
They really don't. So society was desperately screaming for a childcare fix, and Quebec decided to answer that scream.
And they went big.
Very big. In 1997, they rolled out this bold family policy, and the crown jewel of this initiative was a highly subsidized, universally available childcare system.
Right.
It started at just $5 a day and eventually bumped up to $7 a day.
Which is insane.
And it was completely universal, meaning it was available regardless of your income. Wealthy, poor, middle class, everyone got the exact same massive state subsidy.
$7 a day for full-time childcare. That's basically free.
It's the cost of a fancy coffee.
Right. You can see why this was hailed globally as the ultimate template.
Oh, everyone loved it.
Even today, if you follow debates on early childhood education, the Quebec model is constantly held up as this gold standard.
Constantly.
But the thesis of this deep dive is what happens when you actually test that gold standard in reality.
Because the data shows that when women flooded the workplace and toddlers flooded these newly minted public daycares, the developmental cost to the children was terrifying.
It's hard to even read.
It really is. The rollout was incredibly aggressive. Society was cheering. By 1997, 4-year-olds were covered.
Okay.
By 1998, 3-year-olds. By 1999, 2-year-olds. And by the year 2000, the policy covered infants from 0 to 2.
Wow, so basically overnight.
Yeah. It was hailed as the perfect macroeconomic engine. It was going to boost maternal employment, generate massive dual income tax revenue, and theoretically save the province's low birth rates.
Because parents wouldn't be financially penalized for having kids.
Exactly.
But then the psychological and developmental data started trickling in.
Yeah.
And that grand shearing section just went dead silent.
Completely silent.
Let's dig into that first major crack in the glass. The infamous 2008 data drop.
Right. So before the 2013 Kottelenberg and Lehrer paper that we are unpacking today, there was a foundational study in 2008 by Baker, Gruber, and Milligan.
Okay.
They took the early data from the Quebec experiment and compared it to the rest of Canada.
Because the rest of Canada didn't have this policy.
Exactly. The rest of Canada hadn't implemented universal daycare, so it served as this massive, naturally occurring control group.
Which is an economist's dream.
Oh, it's perfect. You have two nearly identical populations sharing the same national culture, but one has this radically different policy variable.
So what did that 2008 snapshot actually reveal?
The findings were catastrophic.
I mean, that's a strong word.
It's the only word that fits. Children participating in this cheap, universal, accessible care experienced a severe collapse in almost every behavioral metric.
Every metric.
Hyperactivity surged. Physical aggression went up significantly. Emotional anxiety skyrocketed. Standardized motor and social development scores dropped across the board.
Okay, but let me push back for a second. If I'm a policymaker, or even just like an optimistic parent, I'm going to push back hard on that 2008 snapshot.
Sure.
Because if a government rolls out a massive, unprecedented social program virtually overnight, it's going to be inherently messy.
It's a huge undertaking.
Right. It's the equivalent of trying to build an airplane while you are flying it. You suddenly have to hire thousands of new caregivers, rent out buildings, set up supply chains for cribs and food.
Yeah, the logistics alone are a nightmare.
Couldn't advocates of universal daycare easily brush us off? Like, couldn't they just argue that the behavioral collapse was just temporary friction?
Right.
Just the growing pains of a new system figuring itself out.
That is precisely the defense the advocates mounted.
They did.
Oh, yeah. They looked at the 2008 data and basically told the public not to panic. They claimed the system was just immature, the caregivers were inexperienced.
The facilities were temporary.
Exactly. Their core argument was, give it time. Time will heal it. The quality will naturally improve as the system stabilizes.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the 2013 paper.
Right.
Because Kottelenberg and Lehrer essentially looked at the advocates and said, you wanted time. We gave you a decade.
A full decade. They incorporated new, extensive waves of data from the National Longitudinal Study of Children and Youth. They tracked these cohorts up to 10 years after the policy started. They looked at children who had been through the matured, stabilized system.
Did time heal the wounds?
No. Time didn't heal the wounds, it infected them.
Oh, man.
10 years later, the negative effects didn't disappear. They exploded. The friction myth was completely obliterated.
Just dead.
Dead. To give you a sense of the scale here, before the policy, there were around 74,000 regulated daycare seats in Quebec.
74,000, okay.
Within a decade, that number skyrocketed to an enormous 200,000 seats.
Wow.
The network nearly tripled in size. The system had plenty of time to mature. The caregivers gained years of experience, yet the researchers found that the negative behavioral effects on the children didn't just persist.
What happened?
On average, the magnitude of those negative effects expanded by a staggering 43%.
Wait. A 43% expansion of harm.
43%.
That completely invalidates the idea of a temporary blip.
Yeah.
I mean, we are talking about an entire generation of children becoming significantly more hyperactive, more anxious, and more physically aggressive as the system became more entrenched, not less.
That's the math.
And it wasn't just their psychological behavior that was breaking down under the weight of this system, right? It was their actual physical biology.
Oh, the physical health data is shocking.
Let's talk about the immunity black hole.
This is one of the most visceral findings in the whole paper. The researchers didn't just look at behavior, they tracked physical health metrics.
Right.
They monitored the probability of a child being reported in, quote, excellent health, and specifically the probability of a child never suffering from nose, throat, and ear infections.
Which, I mean, anyone who has spent more than 5 minutes around a toddler knows is a very delicate baseline.
Yeah.
Very delicate.
Kids are naturally susceptible to germs. But what happens when you take an entire society's worth of infants and toddlers and pack them into standardized rooms for 8 to 10 hours a day?
You fundamentally alter their biological reality.
How so?
Well, following the introduction of the policy, the likelihood of a child never having an ear infection or a nose and throat infection took a massive, sharp nosedive.
It plummeted.
It plummeted. The system effectively institutionalized illness. A daycare setting with high ratios of young children is just a highly efficient vector for pathogens.
Right.
And by incentivizing the entire society to put their kids in these rooms, the government triggered a systemic crash in pediatric health baselines.
The ripple effects of that are just immense. I mean, if a child is chronically battling ear infections, their sleep is destroyed.
Oh, absolutely.
And if their sleep is destroyed, their cognitive development slows down, they become irritable, which registers as behavioral aggression or hyperactivity.
It's a loop. Yeah, you've trapped these kids in a physical and psychological feedback loop of stress. But let me put on my skeptic hat for a moment.
Go for it.
Because we have a massive cultural shift happening simultaneously, right? More mothers are working than ever before. The entire structure of the modern family is changing in the late 90s.
True.
How do the researchers know with absolute certainty that the $7 daycare is the actual villain here? Maybe families in the early 2000s were just inherently more stressed out, and the kids would have had these behavioral issues regardless of the daycare policy.
That is the ultimate methodological hurdle in economics.
Causality.
Exactly. You have to prove causality. You have to prove the daycare policy was the trigger, not just a bystander in a shifting culture.
How do you do that?
Well, standard observational data is practically useless here because it just lumps everyone together. If you just compare a kid in daycare to a kid at home, you're comparing apples to oranges.
Right, because parents who choose daycare might have totally different incomes or different career ambitions or just different baseline stress levels than parents who choose to stay home.
Exactly. So to isolate the policy itself, the paper utilizes a technique called instrumental variable regression.
Okay, stop right there. That sounds like something you'd use to calculate the trajectory of a satellite.
It's dense math.
We are going to strip away the academic jargon. We are going to call this specific mathematical filter the edge families.
I love that. That perfectly captures the essence of the math. Instrumental variables basically allow researchers to statistically isolate a very specific, invisible subgroup of the population.
The edge families.
Right. These are the families who are entirely on the fence. Without the government policy, without that massive $7 a day subsidy, these parents would have kept their children at home.
They wouldn't have used daycare at all.
No, they had no organic intention of using institutional childcare.
But the incredibly cheap price tag pushed them over the edge.
Exactly. It was an offer they financially couldn't refuse.
Okay, so by isolating these specific edge families, the researchers can basically filter out all the cultural noise, all the baseline differences in parenting styles, and zoom in purely on the causal impact of the government's financial incentive.
Yes, that's the beauty of it.
So what happened to the children who were pushed into the system purely because the state made it dirt cheap?
It is an absolute developmental bloodbath.
Wow.
The researchers tracked a standardized metric called the Motor and Social Development Score, or MSD. It measures critical cognitive, motor, and social milestones for kids aged 0 to 3.
Okay, the baseline stuff.
Right. For the children of these edge families, their MSD scores didn't just dip slightly, they plummeted by a shocking 7.898 points.
A near 8-point drop in fundamental early childhood development.
Yes.
That is staggering. What about the behavioral metrics for this specific group?
Physical aggression didn't just increase. The score multiplied by 2.475. Yeah. Hyperactivity and inattention spiked violently. The policy actively and severely damaged the children who were brought into the system solely because of the financial lure.
But the collateral damage of this policy wasn't limited to the toddlers.
No, it wasn't.
And this brings us to the grand, tragic irony of the entire Quebec experiment. Because universal daycare, especially in the political rhetoric of the late 90s, was explicitly sold as the ultimate feminist liberation.
It was supposed to free women.
Exactly. It was designed to free women from the historical burden of the home, to allow them to self-actualize in the workforce without facing the crushing financial penalty of private childcare. It was supposed to make mothers happier, more fulfilled, and less stressed.
The edge family regression data slaps that utopian assumption right in the face.
What did it find?
When the researchers looked at the mothers in this specific policy-driven subgroup, their clinical depression scores violently surged by 3.278 points.
Wait, depression surged.
Surged by over 3 points.
The policy meant to liberate them ended up crushing their mental health. But let's pause and really analyze the psychology of this. Why? How does receiving highly subsidized, nearly free childcare make a mother more depressed? That feels completely counterintuitive.
You have to step out of the spreadsheet and look at the daily reality. The psychological whiplash of what is actually happening inside that home.
Okay, paint the picture.
Imagine you are a mother in one of these edge families. You initially planned, or naturally desired, to stay home or work very part-time while your child was an infant or toddler.
Right, you had an organic equilibrium.
Exactly. But the government steps in and essentially says, you are losing money by staying home. We will make it financially irresistible for you to join the workforce full-time.
You'd be crazy not to take it.
So you take the deal, you go to work. Now look at your new daily reality. Your peaceful morning routine is replaced by the extreme stress of dragging a crying, exhausted toddler out of bed at 6:30 a.m. to get them to the facility before your commute.
Oh, man.
And then you hit the immunity black hole.
Right. The sickness.
Your kid is now constantly sick with ear infections and throat infections, so you are missing work anyway to care for them. But now you carry the compounded guilt of failing at your job and failing to protect your child's health at home.
Lose-lose.
And then the daycare calls you in the middle of your shift to tell you your child is exhibiting extreme physical aggression towards the other toddlers.
Because their impulse control is gone.
Right. You are watching your child's developmental scores drop. You are watching their behavior become erratic. You are pushed by a financial incentive into a workforce balance you weren't organically ready for. And you are watching your child suffer the consequences.
That is a perfect recipe for severe clinical depression.
The state incentivized these families into a lifestyle that completely broke their equilibrium.
You know, right now, if you are listening to this, you're probably ready to declare all daycare inherently evil.
Oh, for sure.
You're probably thinking the entire concept of public childcare is a developmental poison that should be burned to the ground.
It sounds like it.
But just as you reach that conclusion, the data pulls a massive, mind-blowing 180-degree turn. It flips everything we just discussed completely on its head.
This is where the paper becomes a masterpiece of economic analysis. Because it wasn't a disaster for everyone.
What you like?
In fact, for a different segment of the population, the daycare policy was actually a distinct positive.
Okay, wait, how is that possible? You just spent the last 20 minutes walking through a statistical nightmare of sickness, aggression, and depression.
I know.
How can the exact same policy be a nightmare for one group and a benefit for another?
Well, the researchers used a second, totally different mathematical method to evaluate the rest of the population. They call it inverse propensity score reweighting.
Yeah, let's ditch the academic terminology again. Let's call this group the baseline kids.
Perfect. The baseline kids represent the families who likely would have used some form of childcare, regardless of whether the government rolled out the $7 policy.
Okay, so these are mothers who were already highly attached to the labor force.
Yes. They were always going back to work. They just happened to get a massive financial discount when Quebec implemented the universal system.
So when the baseline kids entered the exact same public daycares with the exact same caregivers, what happened to them?
Their motor and social development scores actually increased by a statistically significant 1.395 points. Increased. Furthermore, for these baseline families, the spikes in hyperactivity and aggression were largely statistically insignificant.
Oh, wow.
And for these mothers, their depression scores actually went down slightly, dropping by 0.143 points.
So it's the exact same buildings, the exact same caregivers. A poison for the edge families, a vitamin for the baseline families. It feels like a paradox.
It does. It's known as the heterogeneity puzzle.
The heterogeneity puzzle.
Right. The truth of the Quebec daycare experiment isn't about the absolute quality of the daycare itself. It's entirely about what the child is leaving behind.
Okay, unpack that for me.
You have to look at the delta between the home environment and the institutional environment. We can frame this as the downgrade versus the upgrade.
Let's unpack the downgrade first.
Okay, if a child is in a home where they are receiving high-quality, one-on-one parental care, where a parent is constantly engaging them verbally, mirroring their emotions, reading to them, providing a calm, structured environment, and you pull that child out and throw them into a crowded, noisy public facility with high child-to-adult ratios.
Their environment has been severely downgraded.
Severely. The daycare, no matter how well-intentioned, cannot possibly compete with the high-quality, bespoke home environment they lost.
That perfectly explains the tragedy of the Edge families.
Exactly.
They were financially coerced into trading excellent home care for mediocre institutional care.
Spot on. But then you have the upgrade.
Right.
If a child comes from a struggling background, a highly disadvantaged home, or simply a home where the parents are working multiple jobs, utterly exhausted, and physically unable to provide that constant, high-level cognitive engagement.
Then, putting that child into a structured public facility, even a crowded one, is a massive upgrade.
Yes. The facility provides more routine, more socialization, and more cognitive stimulation than they were ever going to get at home.
So for them, the developmental scores naturally go up.
Exactly.
I mean, this makes logical sense, but it forces us to ask a terrifying question. Why was it a downgrade for so many children?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Why was the overall average across the entire province so incredibly negative? If the system was just a mix of upgrades and downgrades, it should balance out.
But it didn't.
It didn't. Which brings us to the quality collapse. You mentioned earlier that the government expanded the daycare seats from 74,000 to 200,000 to meet the explosive demand of a free system.
Right.
When you expand a system by nearly 300% overnight, what are you sacrificing?
Quality. You're sacrificing quality.
You can't just magically summon 126,000 highly trained early childhood educators out of thin air.
You really can't.
You are scraping the bottom of the barrel for caregivers. You are renting out church basements and retrofitting abandoned retail spaces.
The researchers actually cite a devastating 2005 study by Japel and colleagues.
Okay, what did they find?
They evaluated the actual physical quality of these subsidized daycares right in the thick of the policy's maturity. Out of those hundreds of thousands of seats, only a pathetic 5% were rated as high quality.
5%? Are you kidding me?
5%. That means 95% of the children in this utopian government program were not receiving high quality care.
That is sickening.
And it gets worse. Over 10% of the facilities completely failed minimal basic standards. Failed. They were actively negligent environments. The government successfully warehoused the children, but they triggered an avalanche of low-quality care.
They essentially treated childcare as a homogeneous commodity, like a literal box you just place a kid in so the parents can go to a factory.
That's exactly how it functioned.
But raising a human being isn't a commodity. High-quality care requires highly educated, highly motivated, well-paid professionals who are deeply engaged with the emotional regulation of toddlers.
You cannot instantly manufacture that at scale.
You just can't. Millions of taxpayer dollars were spent to move kids from perfectly safe, loving homes into lowest bidder institutions.
It's wild. But there's another layer to this developmental crash, a psychological trap that the researchers call the optimization error.
Oh, let's talk about the phenomenon of the ghost parents.
This is fascinating.
This is perhaps the most chilling aspect of the entire deep dive, because it looks at how government policy subtly rewires human nature.
Right.
It suggests that the negative effects weren't just the fault of the bad daycares. They were also the result of the parents' subconscious reaction to the existence of the policy.
Yes. Imagine you are a parent before the universal policy exists. You know your child's early development is 100% on your shoulders.
You are highly vigilant.
Highly vigilant. You spend your weekends doing educational activities. You patiently discipline them. You spend an hour reading to them before bed. You are deeply invested because you know you are the sole provider of their human capital.
But then the government steps in with a massive PR campaign and says, we've got this. We have early childhood professionals taking care of your kid for 10 hours a day. It's a world-class system.
What does the human brain instinctively do?
It optimizes.
It optimizes. It conserves energy. The parents subconsciously pull back.
It's like buying a car with a self-driving feature. The moment the salesman assures you the car can steer itself, you subconsciously stop gripping the wheel so tightly.
Exactly.
You look away from the road. You outsource your vigilance. These parents essentially outsource their parenting.
They think, well, the state is handling their cognitive development all day, so I don't need to push them to read that extra book tonight.
Right.
Or, I'm exhausted from working full-time, which the state encouraged me to do, so I'm going to put them in front of the television all weekend. They substitute their own high-quality home investments for low-quality state inputs.
They become ghost parents.
Ghost parents, and the child is left stranded in the void.
Because the state is failing them with a 5% quality rate, and the parents have subconsciously withdrawn their compensatory effort at home.
It is a devastating combination. And the researchers are careful to note that this doesn't mean parents are bad or neglectful people.
No, of course not.
It means they have limited knowledge of the actual quality of the childcare they are receiving. They made an optimization error based on a false utopian promise sold to them by the government.
It paints a grim picture. But we need to keep digging, because the system didn't break every child equally.
No, it didn't.
It had a specific target. If you have a son, you need to pay close attention to this next part. Let's talk about the gender curse.
When the researchers began slicing the data to look at different demographics, a massive glaring red flag appeared in the gender divide.
Okay.
The paper notes companion studies by Kottelenberg and Lehrer that specifically isolated the data between boys and girls.
And what did they find?
They found that almost all of the severe behavioral destruction, the hyperactivity, the physical aggression, the deep social maladjustment was heavily concentrated in boys.
Wait, almost all of it. Why boys? What is happening in the physical space of those daycare rooms that is uniquely destroying the behavioral baselines of young males?
Well, while the economic paper doesn't diagnose the exact neurological mechanism, if we connect this data to broader developmental psychology, it makes perfect sense.
Okay, walk me through it.
Boys, on average, often mature slightly slower in terms of emotional regulation, linguistic development, and impulse control during those critical 0 to 4 years.
That tracks.
They often require different and sometimes more intense one-on-one behavioral coaching from a primary attachment figure.
Right, they need a mother or a father to sit them down, make direct eye contact, and help them co-regulate their nervous system when they get overwhelmed.
Exactly.
They need a quiet space to process their frustration because they don't have the verbal skills to articulate it yet.
Exactly. Now take that boy with his developing nervous system and throw him into a massive, understaffed institutional room with 15 other screaming toddlers.
Oh, man.
And 2 overwhelmed, underpaid caregivers who are just trying to keep everyone alive until 5 p.m.
It is a recipe for psychological chaos.
Total chaos. The boys don't get the specific regulatory feedback they need. The environment is loud, highly competitive for resources and toys, and severely overstimulating.
So their nascent impulse control simply shatters.
It shatters. They become hyperactive to cope with the sensory overload. They become physically aggressive because hitting is the only tool they have left when they don't have the words or the quiet space to process their stress.
So the daycare system effectively acts as a pressure cooker for male behavioral issues.
Exactly. While girls, on average, might possess slightly more advanced early linguistic tools or social coping mechanisms to navigate that specific type of crowded environment, the boys just collapse under the institutional weight.
That is genuinely terrifying. To think a universal mandated policy is systematically disadvantaging half the population at their absolute most vulnerable age.
It's a huge blind spot.
It's a massive blind spot that policymakers entirely ignore when they are just looking at macroeconomic spreadsheets of labor participation.
And speaking of labor participation, let's look at the ultimate stated goal of the policy: supporting working mothers.
Okay, yeah. Did this policy at least protect the children of the women it was explicitly designed to help?
Let's look at the data split strictly between mothers who hold a job and mothers who do not work.
What is the working mom penalty?
The data slacks us again.
Oh, no.
The researchers split the sample and evaluated the kids' motor and social development scores. For the kids of non-working moms, their MSD score dropped by about 11.3 points under the IV estimation.
Which is undeniably bad.
But for the kids of working moms, the exact demographic relying on the system to balance their lives, their motor and social development suffered a catastrophic 13.057-point drop.
13 points.
The hyperactivity and physical aggression scores also surged far more dramatically for the children of working mothers compared to non-working mothers.
So the kids of the working moms suffered significantly worse than the kids of the non-working moms. Why?
It comes right back to the stress transfer we discussed earlier. A working mother relying entirely on this system is exhausted. She is stretched to the absolute physical and emotional limit.
Right.
When she picks up her child at 5:30 p.m., she has vastly less bandwidth, less patience, and less energy to compensate for the poor quality of the daycare.
While the non-working mom, even if she uses the daycare occasionally, still has the reserve energy to provide high-quality engagement, emotional regulation, and educational catch-up when the child is home.
Exactly. The working mother is just trying to get dinner on the table before she collapses.
The policy fundamentally failed to protect the exact demographic it was designed to support. The working mothers were promised a lifeline, but they were handed an anchor.
Now, whenever a study comes out that mathematically dismantles a beloved progressive policy, the critics sharpen their knives.
It always.
They look for any possible flaw to invalidate the findings.
And the classic defense is always, well, you must be missing something. Human lives are too complex to model. You didn't measure the parents' innate intelligence, or their exact genetic predispositions, or the crime rate of their specific neighborhood.
Yep. There is an unobserved variable, therefore your entire study is flawed.
It's the standard academic escape hatch.
But the researchers anticipated this.
They did.
Oh, yeah. And their mathematical reply is essentially, we already calculated the ghost, and our math is bulletproof.
Let's talk about the unseen force. The paper utilizes something called the Altanji test, developed by economists Altanji, Elder, and Tabor.
Right.
We're going to translate the Altanji test into a visual concept, the 5.22 titanium shield.
I love that framing. The Altanji test is designed to calculate exactly how powerful those unmeasured or unseen variables would have to be in order to completely invalidate the findings of the study.
So it measures the size of the ghost you'd need to prove the house isn't haunted?
Precisely. The researchers took every single thing they did, measure the mother's education level, the father's education, immigrant status, rural versus city living, the number of siblings, the exact age of the child, the specific province dynamics.
It is a massive, comprehensive mountain of observed, concrete data.
Yes. And they calculated the predictive power of all that data combined.
Then,
And the Altanji test returned a ratio of 5.22.
what does that actually mean in practical terms?
It means that for a critic to prove this study wrong, they would have to find a mysterious, completely unmeasured variable that is 5.22 times more powerful in dictating a child's life than all of those measured things combined.
A critic would have to find a hidden factor that is over 5 times more powerful than the mother's education, the family's location, and the number of siblings put together.
In the world of statistics and econometrics, that ratio represents an ironclad fortress.
So it's basically impossible.
Statistically impossible. An unobserved variable of that magnitude just doesn't exist without being glaringly obvious. The researchers even state that this ratio strengthens their confidence immensely.
Right.
The cumulative effect of any missing variables would have to outweigh the observables by over 5 times just to negate the effect of the daycare policy. It just isn't going to happen.
So the findings are real, the damage is real, the titanium shield holds.
It holds.
So what does this all mean when we zoom out? If we connect this to the macro-level structure of how we govern society, it reveals a brutal truth. Universal and free is a trap.
It is the ultimate macroeconomic tragedy of this entire deep dive.
Let's explain the trap of universal welfare in this specific context. When a government declares a service universal, it sounds incredibly fair and equitable.
It sounds great on paper.
It means everyone gets it. The struggling single mother in a low-income neighborhood gets the $7 daycare, which is fantastic. She desperately needs it.
But the wealthy dual-income family, making $300,000 a year, living in a pristine suburb, they also get the $7 daycare.
Right. The government takes a finite pool of taxpayer money and spreads it across the entire population, regardless of need.
They dilute the medicine.
It's like scraping a single pat of butter over an entire loaf of bread. By subsidizing the wealthy and the middle class, the government completely tapped out its budget.
Completely.
And because they spread the money so incredibly thin, they couldn't afford to pay for high-quality care. They could only afford to build a massive 200,000-seat system of lowest bidder 5% quality warehouses.
They prioritized the optics of economic equality of access over the actual developmental quality of the care.
Exactly.
And by doing so, they harmed the very kids they were theoretically trying to help. Think back to the heterogeneity puzzle, the upgrade kids.
The kids from disadvantaged backgrounds who actually benefited from the structure of the daycare because their home lives were chaotic.
Right. Those specific vulnerable kids desperately need access to the absolute best top 5% incredibly high-quality care to overcome their baseline disadvantages.
But they can't get it.
No. The system is entirely flooded with middle-class kids taking up seats, and the state has no money left to improve the facilities because they are busy subsidizing families who could have afforded private care.
So if universal free daycare is a mathematical failure that dilutes resources and harms children, what is the true prescription? What should governments be doing instead?
The data demands a total philosophical pivot. The researchers imply that government should completely abandon the universal aspect of free daycare.
Stop subsidizing the rich.
Stop subsidizing the middle class who already have the resources to provide excellent home care or to afford private, high-quality care on their own.
Instead, they need to utilize targeted precision. Provide massive, highly concentrated financial subsidies directly to low-income and disadvantaged families.
Exactly. Don't build a massive state-run warehouse and give them a cheap seat in a bad room. Give them a massive voucher to buy their way into a truly great room.
Allow the vulnerable families to buy into that top tier of high-quality care.
Let the free market dictate the quality for the middle and upper classes, and use the concentrated power of government funding to laser target the kids who actually need an upgrade.
Because a targeted subsidy acknowledges reality.
Yeah.
Children are heterogeneous. Their needs are profoundly different.
While a universal warehouse fundamentally assumes all children are identical widgets on an assembly line.
Which brings us to the grand takeaway of this entire deep dive. It forces us to look at the pyramid of priorities that governs our modern world.
We live in an era that absolutely worships economic efficiency.
We really do.
Yeah.
At the top of the pyramid, you have the policymakers, the politicians, and the corporate interests. They're staring at their macroeconomic spreadsheets.
Right.
They are optimizing for tax revenue generated by dual-income households. They are optimizing for female labor participation charts. They are optimizing for GDP.
They are optimizing entirely for the economy of today.
But at the very bottom of that pyramid, crushed under the immense weight of those massive economic goals, is the emotional and psychological soul of a toddler.
Yeah.
A little boy who is suddenly hyperactive because he is trapped in a noisy room of 20 kids instead of exploring his living room.
A little girl suffering her 4th severe ear infection of the year, her immune system battered by an institutional environment.
A mother weeping in her car before her shift starts because her clinical depression score has spiked and she doesn't understand why she feels like she is failing at everything.
They are the invisible collateral damage of an economic mandate. They are paying the true cost of free childcare.
Right now, countries all over the world are terrified of low birth rates. They are terrified of shrinking labor pools. And in their panic, they are blindly rushing to copy Quebec's model.
They're chasing the utopian promise of universal daycare without looking at the devastation in the data.
But the math from this decade-long experiment demands that you ask a chilling question.
What's the question?
If we are systematically institutionalizing our children into lowest bidder facilities just to get parents back onto the assembly line, are we actually saving our future economy? Or are we just bankrupting our children's future to pay for today?
That is the question.
At the start of this deep dive, we talked about how a utopian promise can blind us to reality. The damage we've unpacked today, the lost developmental milestones, the spiked anxiety, the fractured family dynamics, none of that shows up on a standard societal balance sheet.
No, it hides in the muddy waters of daily life, disguised as just the struggles of the new normal.
But the math sees it. The math proves it's there.
And once you see the math, you can't unsee the fracture it leaves behind.
Something for you to deeply consider the next time someone promises you a magic pill.